So now I'm going to talk about the content of Book 5, which follows after Book 4, which of course, introduces how an English version by the Pākehā community following the English version only of the treaty and not the Māori text, it enabled them to try to bring in Pākehā law and then use that law to try and attempt to colonise Māori people. So in Book 5, which is a fantastic book as well, the first section introduces, it unpacks a little bit about tikanga and law, what Māori tikanga was and is, and it also looks at Pākehā law and how they most of the Pākehā community had no investment in following the Māori text, so they followed the English version because it suited them, because it said that in Article 1 that Māori had ceded their sovereignty. So this unpacks, Section 1 unpacks the differences and similarities between Māori tikanga and law and why we need them, but it introduces how Pākehā community use the English version of the treaty to start beginning to have their laws in their country, but they weren't using them to manage Pākehā people only. They were using them to try and oversee Māori people as well, and which is not what Māori had agreed to in the Māori text in Book 4. So then Section 2 has an entire timeline of the actual legislations that were used in the name of the English version under Pākehā, really an illegal form of government. At that point, it wasn't really legal what they were doing. It was certainly unethical. That what they did is these laws, each one transgressed the agreements that they had made in the actual Māori text. And now in looking at that whole timeline of different, from 1840 straight away, as soon as the treaty was signed, the first legislations were started to be made, and basically you saw a very, very strong Māori community that was very supported by a very, very strong resource base of sea and forest and land. They had everything that they needed, and this is how their community functioned as it did. And but the laws were used to undermine this resource, and over time has transferred that resource from a very strong Māori resource base to, generally speaking, a very strong Pākehā resource base in this country. So now statistically, Māori tend to do poorly in all of the statistics, whereas Pākehā, generally speaking, tend to do better than their Māori counterparts. So, and I'm suggesting that this is a direct result of the colonisations that occurred through these laws that were used. And so that unpacks those transfer of resources and the impacts of those. And then it looks at specific laws. It gets so teachers can read about specific laws, and students can too, and look at their, in particular, the laws and their impacts on Māori communities and individuals, as well as Pākehā and individuals and communities as well. And then in Section 5 is the section where it's sort of putting to the reader, the educators, to be questioning whether do they actually want to continue this thing called the standard story and the colonial version of story of history, or would they prefer to actually be engaged in a honouring the treaty discourse, which comes from the treaty education movement in this country of 30 to 40 years, and is about trying to honour the treaty and utilise the Māori text as well. And so there's some reading and questions and activities about that. Then in the next section 6 is a fantastic section on Pākehā culture. For example, in this country, what happens often in classrooms is that we study, we go and study, what we call ethnic groups. So we'll study Samoans and we'll study Chinese people and they'll study Africans, but we never study Pākehā culture. And so in the 180 years that we've been here, we've never had conversations with each other and with Māori people about what it means to be Pākehā and what is that identity all about, and creating those identities as well. So there's a whole lot of information in there about that and activities to unpack that, and asking the questions: what is a New Zealander? What is a Kiwi? What is a European? And what's Pākehā? What are the differences between those things? And then it goes into and it clarifies that those this section is really quite a critical study to do, because there are a lot of Pākehā children in this country who kind of grow up believing that they don't have a culture, when in fact we do have a culture, very much so. We definitely have a culture in this country, and so we need to be talking about what that is for our own selves, but also to support Māori to be able to be Māori as well. And then in the last section, it goes, because we've done some of the hard things that Pākehā have been involved in, it's got a whole sort of timeline of really neat things that Pākehā have done in this country, that again there is information and activities about, like setting up the welfare state system in this country and having one of the highest unionised country in the world early times, and so on. Lots of some of the good things that Pākehā have been involved in. So this book is full of incredible stories and incredible people to be studied by our country, and that's what's in the content of book 5. Now, book 6 carries is similar in that basically it goes from it has Māori responses to the Pākehā sort of laws that were used to transgress against the treaty. So that goes from 1840s onwards, but actually in this book goes right from the very beginning of when Pākehā first had encounters with Māori, and so about the early 1820s, 1814, 16, etc. That period, even from that early period, Māori were very much interested in maintaining their own sovereignty, and of course, because it was a Māori world then, and Pākehā were absolutely the minority, and so that was a norm. But when Pākehā began to misbehave, Māori people began very clearly to set their boundaries around that. So this book goes from the 1820s, earlier than that, right through to about TPPA,